The first time Patrick saw Julian Caldwell, he felt the air shift, like the world had tilted just enough to throw him off balance. It wasn't love, not yet, but something sharper, more dangerous, like a spark threatening to ignite a wildfire. He was 25, fresh out of law school, and desperate to prove himself in the cutthroat world of Manhattan's legal elite. Patrick adjusted his tie, his palms sweaty as he stepped into the glass-walled office of Caldwell and Associates. The firm was a titan in corporate law, and Julian, its youngest partner at 29, was a legend whispered about in law school halls, a ruthless, brilliant attorney who could dismantle opponents with a single glance. Patrick had landed the assistant role through sheer grit, but the rumors about Julian's icy demeanor had him on edge. "Mr. Hayes," Julian said without looking up from his desk, his voice low and precise, like a blade slicing through silk. "You're late." Patrick froze. He wasn't late. His watch confirmed he was 3 minutes early, but the weight of Julian's tone made him question reality itself. I apologize, sir," he stammered, cursing the flush creeping up his neck. Julian finally raised his eyes, piercing blue and unreadable, studying Patrick like a chessboard he'd already mastered. "Don't let it happen again. Your desk is outside. Get to work." That was day one. Patrick learned quickly that working for Julian meant surviving a storm of impossible demands and unrelenting perfectionism. Julian was a machine, polished suits, clip responses, and a schedule that left no room for human error. Yet, beneath the cold exterior, Patrick caught glimpses of something else, a flicker of exhaustion in Julian's eyes after a 16-hour day, or the way his fingers lingered on a photo frame he kept face down on his desk. Patrick's job was to anticipate Julian's needs before he voiced them, coffee black, files organized by case precedents, and never, ever interrupting his morning calls. But the real challenge was navigating Julian's walls. The man was a fortress, his emotions locked behind a facade of control. Patrick, though, was no stranger to playing a part. Growing up in a small Ohio town, he'd learned to hide his truth, his attraction to men, behind a charming smile and straight-A report cards. Faking it was second nature. So, he played the perfect assistant. He laughed at the right moments, stayed late without complaint, and mirrored Julian's precision. But the more he observed Julian, the more he wondered, what would it take to crack that icy shell? 6 months in, Patrick got his first clue. It was late, the office empty except for the two of them. Julian was preparing for a high-stakes merger case, and Patrick had stayed to proofread documents. A storm raged outside, rain lashing the windows. Julian, usually immaculate, looked disheveled, his tie loosened, hair falling into his eyes. "Hayes," Julian said, voice softer than usual. "Why are you still here? You could have left hours ago." Patrick hesitated, sensing a rare opening. "Because you're still here, sir." Julian's gaze lingered, a spark of something, curiosity, maybe, flashing before he looked away. "Go home," he said, but there was no bite in it. That night, Patrick lay awake, replaying the moment. He didn't know why Julian's softness unnerved him more than his sharpness. But he felt it, the spark from day one growing, threatening to burn through his carefully constructed facade. Over the next year, their dynamic shifted. Julian began to trust Patrick, delegating more than just menial tasks. They worked late nights together, their banter evolving from cautious to playful. Patrick learned Julian's tells, the way his lips twitched when he was amused, or how he'd rub his temple when a case wasn't going his way. Patrick started to see the man behind the lawyer, a man who loved jazz, who sketched in the margins of his legal pads, who hid his vulnerabilities like a secret he couldn't afford to share. Patrick, too, was hiding. He'd never told Julian he was gay, though he suspected Julian knew. The law firm wasn't exactly a safe space for openness. Whispers about professionalism and image kept Patrick guarded. But with Julian, he felt a pull, a dangerous, magnetic need to be seen. One evening, during a rare moment of downtime, Julian handed Patrick a glass of whiskey from his office stash. "To surviving another week," Julian said, raising his glass. Their fingers brushed as Patrick took the drink, and the air crackled with unspoken tension. "You don't have to keep up the act. You know," Julian said suddenly, his voice low. "I see you." Patrick's heart stopped. Did Julian mean his work, his ambition, or something deeper? Before he could respond, Julian's phone rang, shattering the moment. That night, Patrick made a decision. If Julian saw him, he'd see Julian too. He'd fake whatever it took, charm, loyalty, even love, to get closer. Not because he wanted to manipulate Julian, but because he needed to understand the man who'd become his obsession. What Patrick didn't know was how dangerously close he was to falling for real. By year 2, Patrick had perfected the art of being indispensable. He knew Julian's coffee order, his preferred pen brand, even the exact angle he liked his desk chair tilted. But more than that, he knew Julian's silences, the ones that meant he was stressed, or angry, or, rarest of all, happy. Patrick had become the shadow to Julian's light. Always there, always ready. Their late-night work sessions had become a ritual. The office, bathed in the glow of desk lamps, felt like their own world. They'd talk about cases, then drift into music or books, their conversations weaving between professional and personal. Julian never asked about Patrick's life outside the office, and Patrick never offered. It was safer that way. But safety was an illusion. Patrick's feelings for Julian were growing, a tide he couldn't hold back. Every shared laugh, every fleeting touch, added fuel to the fire. He told himself it was strategy, get close, earn trust, secure his place at the firm. But deep down, he knew it was more. He was falling, and it terrified him. One night, after a grueling case win, Julian suggested they celebrate. Not at the office, but at a jazz club in Greenwich Village. Patrick hesitated. Mixing work and play felt like crossing a line, but Julian's rare smile convinced him. The club was dim, alive with the hum of a saxophone. Julian, in a rare departure from his suits, wore a black sweater that hugged his frame, his usual intensity softened by the music. They sat close, their knees brushing under the table. Patrick felt dizzy, not from the wine, but from Julian's proximity. "You're good at this," Julian said, his voice warm, making people feel at ease. Patrick laughed, deflecting. "It's just practice. You're not exactly easy to read." "You know," Julian's eyes held his, searching. "Maybe you're not looking hard enough." The words hung between them, heavy with possibility. Patrick wanted to lean in, to close the distance. But fear stopped him. What if he'd misread everything? What if this was just Julian being kind? The moment passed, but left a mark. Patrick started noticing things he'd ignored. The way Julian's gaze lingered. The way he'd find excuses to call Patrick into his office. Was Julian feeling it too? Or was Patrick projecting, seeing what he wanted to see? Back at the office, the tension grew. A major case, a billion-dollar corporate merger, was consuming the firm. Julian was relentless, working 18-hour days, and Patrick matched his pace. One night, as they reviewed contracts, Julian snapped. "This is wrong," he said, slamming a file down. "You missed a clause. Do you have any idea what's at stake?" Patrick flinched. He hadn't missed anything. He'd triple-checked, but Julian's stress was a storm, and Patrick was caught in it. "I'll fix it," he said quietly, swallowing his pride. Julian sighed, rubbing his eyes. "I'm sorry. It's not you. This case, it's killing me." Patrick saw it then, Julian's vulnerability, raw and unguarded. Without thinking, he reached out, touching Julian's arm. "You're not alone in this," he said. Julian didn't pull away. For a moment, they sat there, the air thick with unspoken words. Then Julian stood abruptly. "Get some rest. Patrick. We'll finish tomorrow." Patrick left, his heart pounding. He was in too deep, and he knew it. He'd started this game to get close to Julian, but now he was the one unraveling. The next week, everything changed. Julian asked Patrick to join him on a client trip to Chicago. It was a first. Assistants rarely traveled with partners. On the plane, Julian was quieter than usual, his usual confidence replaced by something softer. "Patrick," he said as they waited for their bags at O'Hare. "Why do you stay? You could be anywhere, doing anything." The question caught Patrick off guard. "Because I believe in you," he said, the words spilling out before he could stop them. Julian's expression shifted, a mix of surprise and something deeper. "You don't know what you're saying," he murmured, but his eyes told a different story. That night, at a client dinner, Julian laughed more, his hand brushing Patrick's under the table. Patrick felt like he was floating, every touch a promise. But doubt gnawed at him. Was he imagining this? Or was Julian finally letting him in? When they returned to New York, Patrick made a choice. He'd push further, test the waters. He started leaving small gestures, a handwritten note on Julian's desk, a coffee delivered with a smile. Julian noticed. His response is warmer, his walls crumbling. But Patrick wasn't prepared for what came next. The turning point came in Central Park, on a crisp autumn evening. Julian had texted Patrick, asking to meet outside the office, a first. Patrick arrived to find Julian on a bench, his breath visible in the chilly air, a scarf loosely draped around his neck. The city hummed around them, but the moment felt like theirs alone. "You've been different lately," Julian said, his voice low. Bolder. Patrick's pulse raced. "Is that a bad thing?" Julian's lips curved. A rare, genuine smile. "No. It's disarming." They walked, their shoulders brushing, the tension between them electric. When they stopped by a fountain, Julian turned to Patrick, his eyes searching. "Why do you do it?" The notes, the coffee, all of it. Patrick could have lied, kept up the act. But something in Julian's gaze broke him. "Because I see you," he said, echoing Julian's words from months ago. And I can't stop. Julian stepped closer, his hand grazing Patrick's. For a moment, Patrick thought he'd kiss him. But Julian pulled back, his expression conflicted. We can't, he said, voice rough. Not here. Not like this. Patrick's heart sank, but he nodded. I know. They parted ways, the air heavy with what hadn't been said. Patrick spent the night replaying it, torn between hope and fear. He'd pushed too far, or maybe not far enough. Back at the office, the merger case reached a fever pitch. Julian was a whirlwind, barking orders, his patience razor thin. Patrick bore the brunt of it, but he didn't mind. He'd seen Julian's softer side, and it gave him hope. Then came the accident. It was a Tuesday, late. Julian was driving back from a client meeting upstate. Patrick had stayed at the office, finalizing documents. His phone buzzed at 2 a.m., a hospital. Julian's car had skidded on black ice, crashing into a guardrail. He was alive, but in critical condition. Patrick's world stopped. He raced to the hospital, his mind a blur of fear and guilt. Had he distracted Julian? Pushed him too hard? He found Julian in the ICU, tubes snaking from his arms, his face bruised but still impossibly beautiful. Mr. Hayes, a nurse handed Patrick a bag of Julian's belongings. Among them was a notebook, worn and dog-eared. Patrick opened it, his hands trembling. Inside were sketches, cityscapes, jazz musicians, and, on the last page, a portrait of Patrick, his smile captured in delicate pencil strokes. Patrick's breath caught. Julian had seen him, truly seen him, long before he'd admitted it to himself. He stayed by Julian's side, sleeping in the hospital chair, refusing to leave. When Julian woke, groggy and disoriented, his first word was, Patrick. I'm here, Patrick said, his voice breaking. Julian reached for his hand, weak but deliberate. I didn't want it to be like this, he whispered. Patrick squeezed his hand, tears burning his eyes. It doesn't matter. I'm not going anywhere. Over the next weeks, Patrick became Julian's anchor. He handled the firm's inquiries, kept Julian's cases afloat, and sat with him through endless hospital visits. Julian, stripped of his defenses, began to open up. He told Patrick about his past, a conservative family, a closeted youth, the pressure to be perfect. Patrick shared his own story, the fear of being himself in a world that demanded conformity. Their bond deepened, but so did Patrick's guilt. He'd started this with a plan to fake closeness for advantage. Now, every touch, every shared smile, felt tainted by his original intent. One night, as Julian slept, Patrick found a letter tucked in the notebook. It was addressed to him, written before the accident. Patrick, it began, I don't know how to say this, but you've changed me. I've spent years hiding, but you make me want to be seen. I'm scared, but I'm falling for you. Patrick's heart shattered. Julian had loved him, and he'd been playing a game. He vowed to make it right. No more faking. From now on, every moment would be real. Julian's recovery was slow, but Patrick was there for every step. He wheeled Julian through physical therapy, laughed at his terrible hospital food jokes, and read him case files when he was too weak to hold them. The hospital room became their sanctuary, a place where walls didn't exist. But the letter haunted Patrick. He hadn't told Julian the truth, that his affection had started as a calculated move. Every time Julian smiled at him, the guilt tightened its grip. He wanted to confess, but fear stopped him. What if the truth destroyed everything? One evening, as they sat by the hospital window, Julian spoke. "You don't have to do this. You know. Stay with me." Patrick's chest ached. "I want to." Julian's eyes softened. "Why? I've been a nightmare to work for." Patrick laughed, but it was hollow. "You're not that bad." Julian reached for his hand, his touch warm. "You're lying. But I'm glad you're here." The moment was perfect, and that made it worse. Patrick couldn't keep lying. He pulled his hand away, standing abruptly. "I need to tell you something." Julian's brow furrowed. "What is it?" Patrick took a breath, his voice shaking. "When I started working for you, I wanted to impress you, to get ahead. I thought if I got close to you, it'd help my career. I didn't expect to." He stopped, the words catching in his throat. "I didn't expect to fall in love with you." Julian's face was unreadable. For a moment, Patrick thought he'd ruined everything. Then Julian spoke, his voice steady. "You think I didn't know you were ambitious? I hired you for it." Patrick blinked, stunned. "You knew." Julian's lips twitched. "I'm not blind, Patrick. But I also saw how you changed. How you stayed, even when I was impossible. That's not ambition. That's something else." Patrick's knees buckled. He sank into the chair, tears spilling over. "I'm sorry. I should have been honest." Julian leaned forward, wincing from the effort. "You're here now. That's what matters." They sat in silence, the weight of the confession settling. For the first time, Patrick felt free. No more games. No more masks. Just them. Julian was discharged a month later. Patrick moved into his apartment to help with his recovery, a temporary arrangement that felt anything but. They cooked together, watched old movies, and talked late into the night. Julian's walls were gone, replaced by a warmth Patrick hadn't thought possible. But the firm loomed over them. Julian's absence had caused a power struggle, and whispers about their relationship were spreading. Patrick overheard colleagues gossiping about favoritism, about unprofessional behavior. He ignored it, but Julian didn't. "We need to be careful," Julian said one night, his voice tight. "The firm, they'll use this against us." Patrick's stomach twisted. "Let them. I don't care." Julian's eyes darkened. "I do. I worked too hard to lose everything." The word stung, but Patrick understood. Julian had built his life on control, and this, whatever they had, was chaos. They agreed to keep things quiet, at least for now. But secrecy came at a cost. Patrick felt the strain, the constant need to hide. He loved Julian, but he hated pretending they were just colleagues. One day, a senior partner called Patrick into his office. "You're close to Julian," he said, his tone icy. "Too close. Step back, or you'll both regret it." Patrick's blood boiled. He wanted to fight, to tell the truth. But Julian's career, his life's work, was on the line. So, he nodded, promising to keep his distance. That night, he told Julian about the meeting. Julian's face hardened. "They don't get to control us," he said. Not anymore. Patrick's heart soared, but doubt lingered. Could they really fight the system and win? The firm's pressure intensified. Partners watched Julian and Patrick like hawks, waiting for a misstep. Julian threw himself back into work, determined to prove his worth. But the strain showed. He was paler, his temper shorter. Patrick tried to ease the burden, but the secrecy was suffocating. One night, they argued. It was rare. They'd always been careful with each other, but the tension had built too long. "You're pulling away," Patrick said, his voice breaking. "I thought we were past this." Julian paced, his hands clenched. "I'm trying to protect us." "You don't get it. The firm could ruin me. And what about us?" Patrick shot back. "Are we just collateral damage?" Julian stopped, his eyes raw. "You're everything to me. But I can't lose this. Not after everything I've sacrificed." Patrick wanted to scream, to shake Julian until he saw sense. But he saw the fear in Julian's eyes, the fear of losing control, of being exposed. "So," he softened, "we'll figure it out. Together." Julian nodded, but the rift remained. They were fighting two battles, one against the firm and one against their own doubts. Patrick started researching, looking for a way out. He found stories of other firms, more progressive ones, where they could be themselves. He pitched the idea to Julian: leave Caldwell and Associates. Start fresh somewhere else. Julian listened, but his silence spoke volumes. This was his empire, his legacy. Walking away wasn't easy. Meanwhile, the merger case resurfaced. A rival firm had filed a countersuit, and Julian was called to lead it. He dove in, his old fire returning. But Patrick saw the toll it took. Julian was pushing himself too hard, still recovering from the accident. One evening, Patrick found Julian asleep at his desk, papers scattered. He gently shook him awake. "You need to rest," he said. Julian's eyes were bloodshot. "I can't." "Not now." Patrick's heart ached. "You're killing yourself for them." "For what?" Julian didn't answer, but his hand found Patrick's, squeezing tightly. It was a small gesture, but it said everything. The countersuit hearing was brutal. Julian was brilliant, but the rival firm played dirty, digging into his personal life. They'd heard the rumors, and they weren't above using them. In the courtroom, Patrick saw Julian flinch when the opposing counsel made a veiled comment about distractions. Afterward, Julian was quiet, his face a mask of exhaustion. "They're not wrong," he said finally. "You're a distraction. But you're the only thing keeping me sane." Patrick's throat tightened. "Then let's stop hiding. Let's fight for us." Julian's eyes met his, a storm of emotions swirling. "I want to. God, I want to." That night, they made a plan. They'd finish the case, then leave the firm. It was risky. Julian's reputation, their finances, everything was on the line. But for the first time, they were choosing each other over fear. The case dragged on, each day a battle. Patrick worked tirelessly, supporting Julian while navigating the firm's politics. The senior partners were circling, sensing weakness. But Patrick and Julian were a team, stronger together than apart. One night, as they walked through Central Park, Julian stopped. "I love you," he said, the words raw and unguarded. "I should have said it sooner." Patrick's breath caught. He'd waited 3 years for this, and it was worth every second. "I love you too," he said, pulling Julian into a kiss. The world didn't end. The stars didn't fall. But in that moment, they were free. The countersuit ended in a victory, but it was bittersweet. The firm celebrated, but Julian and Patrick knew the truth. They'd won the battle, but the war was far from over. The partners' whispers had grown louder, their warnings more direct. It was time to go. Julian resigned first. He walked into the senior partners meeting, his head high, and laid out his terms. He'd leave quietly, no fuss, but he wouldn't hide who he was anymore. The partners were stunned, Julian Caldwell, their star, walking away. But his resolve was unshakable. Patrick followed, submitting his resignation the same day. The firm tried to keep him, offering promotions, raises. But Patrick had made his choice. He wasn't just Julian's assistant anymore. He was his partner, in every sense. They moved to San Francisco, a city that felt like a fresh start. Julian joined a progressive firm that valued his talent and his truth. Patrick enrolled in a part-time law program, chasing his own dreams. They found a small apartment by the bay, where they could be themselves without fear. Life wasn't perfect. There were fights about money, about stress, about the future. But they faced them together. No more secrets, no more masks. Julian's accident had stripped away their defenses, forcing them to confront their truths. And in that vulnerability, they found something stronger than ambition or fear: love. One evening, as they sat on their balcony, watching the sunset over the Golden Gate Bridge, Julian took Patrick's hand. "You saved me," he said. Not just after the accident. Every day, Patrick smiled, his heart full. "You saved me too." They'd spent 3 years hiding, Patrick faking love to get close, Julian hiding behind his walls. But the accident had revealed the truth. They were meant for each other, flaws and all. Their story wasn't just about love. It was about courage, the courage to be seen, to fight for what mattered, to build a life on their own terms. In a world that demanded perfection, they chose authenticity. And that was enough.